Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Occult Explorers. I'm Snappy, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Dion. How's it going, Dion?
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. And we also have two special guests with us, both from the UK. We have Ryan Seven. How's it going, Ryan?
It's definitely been going all day, all week. It's been going. So, believe it or not, this is a chance to sit down and have a rest.
Wild. And we're joined also by our good friend Andrew Auldboy. How's it going, Andrew?
Absolutely great. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. So thanks a lot. Been looking forward to this one.
Yeah, this is going to be so fun because both of you guys are sort of experts on kind of UK. Ryan, you're an occult researcher, a tarot designer, and a filmmaker. Everyone should go check out his channel, Ryan Seven. So you're very well steeped in a lot of this kind of occult history of the UK. And then Auldboy, you're a researcher specializing in sort of traditional mythology and the history of the British Isles in general. And you've been researching this for the last couple of years on your channel, right?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I think it's natural to kind of explore the regions that you live in. You know, I got interested in just looking what was around me and the history that was there. And then that kind of spurred my interest on, started getting more into thinking about mythology, philosophy, you know, how the universe works. That's basically was my ultimate goal, is to just read as many old things as possible and figure out what's going on.
So beautiful. So beautiful. I love that. So for the last about, few weeks, like 5 or 6 weeks now, Dion and I have been doing this extended series called The Epicurean Guide to Lucifer. And we've been looking at sort of like these secret occult movements that were kind of infiltrating and running along in European society during the Renaissance and in the early modern period. And we wanted to kind of, we were mostly focused on like France and Germany, and we're starting to move in the UK, which is why we decided to ask you guys to come on here. So Dion, before we get into this, do you have anything you want to set up for our UK studies related to this kind of Epicurean guide and where we've been coming from over these last few weeks?
Well, I'd like to say thank you for the gentleman for coming on. Definitely appreciate your time.
Always a pleasure to be in your presence, Dion.
Yes, thank you.
I'm steeped in Hammer films, BBC.
Yes,
as a child, I used to watch BBC and Hammer films.
I was literally, the last conversation I had was with a lady about Hammer horror films on Channel 4 at 12 o'clock at night when I was a kid. Literally the last conversation I had.
That's beautiful.
Every Sunday for me as a child, every Sunday I'd watch Hammer films. And for some reason I had BBC as a kid. It was as a little kid growing up. So I watched Sherlock Holmes. I watched so many different things. And so I have a respect for English culture.
Oh, wicked.
Let's say British culture, Irish culture, Scottish culture. That's why I said these isles, because I was trying to figure out, well, how do you encompass all the islands there, all the cultures there? How do you bring it all together? And the only thing I came across on Google was, well, somebody refers it to as these isles or these islands, because it's an island of a lot of different cultures. And so I want to put that out there, that I recognize that not everybody's the same in United Kingdom, in Ireland, in Scotland, and in England. You know, this is Auldboys, I know, goes deep into this stuff, studying the Pict, the Druid, the Celtic.
Right. So yeah, let's hit this up by asking you, Auldboy, what can you tell us kind of about like the Druids? You know, because I know like this is kind of a contested idea in terms of like not a lot of the cultural products survive from the Druids. You have Stonehenge. Do we have any major texts or any kind of like,
Unfortunately, there's not a lot to go on, and we are basically we have to look at the classical authors essentially, and the people who did have contact with them, such as Tacitus, Caesar. But it's difficult, as you're probably aware with reading all texts. It's usually a one-sided kind of piece. So I'm not saying there's there's anything wrong with reading these kind of texts, but you always have to bear in mind, you know, sometimes terms that are being used might not have been used by these actual people, for example. So you're always kind of trying to interpolate a little bit when you're reading these sources. However, when we break down fundamentally the word druid into its components, it comes from deru, which is from Proto-Indo-European, and you can see that coming through in Sanskrit for taru. It's doru in the Greek, and it's related to wood, or sometimes object made of wood. I believe doru can be used for a spear shaft, for example.
Yeah,
So,
the Sanskrit word is druk or druk. Yeah,
is it
yeah,
druk?
yeah.
Yeah, and you can kind of see that coming through. I believe it's in like Hittite and Luwian as well, which is, you know, it's very similar. It's very similar to the Sanskrit. So it looks like it hasn't changed that much prior to when Celtic diverged into kind of Irish and Welsh. There's a bit of a derivation there, but it ultimately comes from this word which means oak. It can specifically mean oak or wood. And then the other element, which is the with, because it's derwyth in Welsh. This comes from the same root as wade, which means to see, and that comes through in the Latin as, you know, words like video, to see. So it can mean tree or oak knower or seer, because, you know, the meaning, there's a bit of an interpretation with the meaning as well. Or the oak can also have the connotation of being strong or true as well. So it could potentially mean truth knower or truth seer, or oak knower, oak seer, something like that. So this is generally what's accepted as the linguistic root for the term druid. And when we look at the sources, we can see from people like Tacitus, when he was attacking the Druid stronghold on Anglesey, he says that they worshipped in groves. He says that they used divination in their, they used entrails in their divination practices. He said that they had altars that they were fumigated with, or they had altars that were fuming. And then you have, it's Caesar who says that they actually utilized the Greek letters in Gaul. So the Druids in Gaul were utilizing the Greek letters.
Oh, I never knew that. I knew that Caesar is the one where we get the Wicker Man mythology from. That's so interesting. He says that they used the Greek alphabet.
Yeah, he says that in their private and public affairs, he says even though they didn't commit anything to writing, he said in private and public affairs, they utilized the Greek letters. And the archaeology shows that there's been finds in Gaul, which are Celtic, but using the Greek letters, and sometimes the Etruscan as well. There's been a few where it's actually the Etruscan letters that were being used. And Caesar also tells us that these Gauls, the Druids in Gaul, he said that the Druidism had been installed there from Britain. And he says that you would go to Britain to actually learn the art of Druidry. So even though it did seem to be, you know, spanning into Europe, the place that you would go and study, it seems, was Britain. So this seemed to be the sort of the core region. And in the Irish mythology as well, you have some female Druids, and it says in there as well in the mythology that they were trained in Britain also.
In a lot of later mythology as well, a lot of it being occultist philosophy and mythology, you find that Britain's cited as a place where even the Egyptians came to learn. And that when you actually go and look at the name for Britain in other countries, I think is it the Chinese or Indian? Britain translates something like the seat of religion. And this is true for a few different languages at different times. But a lot of the time, places seem to point a lot. I'll point out that in Taoism as well, they have a map of the body, of the human body, and you'll see like there's farmland on there and water wheels, and it's path for what you'd know as Kundalini now, but the chi. But when you look at that map, it's exactly Great Britain. I've even put a map of Great Britain over the top. It's exactly Great Britain, all the peaks, but it's strange. Britain does seem to to echo, and is known for being a place of magic for some reason. It's just steeped here, but no one can quite put the finger on it apart from characters like Dee. But
I remember a few weeks ago we were talking, old boy, and you had mentioned the origins of the name Scotland having to do. Wasn't it Egyptian or relating to an Egyptian princess? What's the mythology of that?
So the mythology, it's the Book of the Taking of Ireland is predominantly the mythology which mentions this, which is obviously Irish mythology. It's written in Middle Irish, so it's around about probably 900 AD. However, it's utilizing other sources that were earlier that have subsequently been lost. So again, it's very tricky because there's different redactions, and different people have compiled different versions of the book, pulling on different sources. However, the story goes that the Gaels descend from a guy called Phineas, who has quite a lot of parallels to Phineas in the Greek mythology, strangely enough. And this Phineas in the Irish mythology is apparently a king of Scythia. He has 2 sons. He's involved in the Tower of Babel and the distribution of language, which Phineas in the Greek mythology seems to have. It varies from source to source, but it has some relation to Cadmus, who apparently, brought the Phoenician letters. And this Phineas, Irish Phineas, he sends one of his sons to become knowledgeable in all this language. And the Egyptians approach him, his son, who's called Nell, and he says, will he come to Egypt to teach us the letters and the language? And he eventually marries this pharaoh's daughter, who's called Scotia or Scotta, or Scotia, as I pronounce it. And then they have a son called Gaethel Glaz, and Glaz means like a greeny blue kind of color. And apparently he was a contemporary with Moses, and he gets bitten by a snake, and Moses heals him. But you can tell there's a clear intent to kind of link it all into, the Christian mythology, religion. Sorry. Sorry, I've probably offended somebody there. I apologize.
Offend people, right?
But anyways, then if you strip that back, you can kind of see this kind of core mythology that's underlying before the Christian influence. And she dies when they're forced to leave, because apparently when the pharaoh dies, they get kicked out of Egypt, this Scythian prince and his descendants. They sail around the Mediterranean. Generations go by. They've got a druid on the ship with them. They encounter harpies at one point as well. They settle in various places. They have various battles with various people, and they eventually settle in Spain. And at this point, the descendant of Scotia is called Brigus or Breogan, and he unites. He becomes dominant in the area. He unites his people under a kind of government, and then he founds a city called Brigantia, and there's a big lighthouse there, and it's the lighthouse that stands there today is a kind of refurbished Roman tower. However, they say the foundation of this tower could potentially be Phoenician in origin. And when you look at it, the Romans, obviously, they say, yep, the Brigantes were here. They're called the city Brigantia, and it becomes Braganza today in Portugal as well. And these Brigantes were also in Ireland. They were in Britain. And what's interesting is if you draw a line from the lighthouse in Galicia to Waterford in Ireland, which is where the Brigantes were, and there's a lighthouse there as well, the straight line that's cast passes very close to the Scilly Isles, which is where, this ancient
tin Isles potential, right?
Going on. So that brings us into the sort of the tin element and this early trade network that was going on the Atlantic coast.
Right.
You've got to recognize as well. I think that Snappy, you'd said previously, you mentioned Stonehenge in accordance with the Druids. Well, actually, Stonehenge is around when the pyramids are around being built.
Right. That's my bad.
So, yeah. So, I mean, how long were Phoenician style people coming here, because I don't think that was the local populace necessarily. They seem like settlers, but that's very early on, like very early on. Did you have any ideas of who that might be, Mr. Auldboy?
So this
Oh boy.
Atlantic Bronze Age trade network, it's the late Bronze Age. So it's, off the top of my head, it's somewhere around 1300 BC. And then I believe it starts moving into the Iron Age around about 800 BC, round about that. So it's in that transitional period between the two.
But there is some interesting thing. It's fun. I thought it was really interesting you mentioning the Romans building upon ancient, Celtic or Druidic monuments, because this is a kind of a theme that I hear about in a lot of the mythology and the occulted history. Like, we've talked at length about the Mabinogi in the story of Branwen, and it ends, the story, for those who don't know, it's with her taking the head of her brother, the giant Bran, which has now been transformed into a totem for giving oracles, and she buries it in a mound that is said to be the seat for what becomes London. And you actually were saying that there's a couple potential sites that this could be in modern England, right?
Yeah, so it was, if you look at Windsor Castle, there's a circular building on top of a mound. Now, these mounds, they're commonly known as Motte and Bailey castles. And what they say is they were built in the Norman period, where they would build this, this mound. The castle would be on top, and it's kind of like a natural defense. But what's really interesting is a lot of these sites, they're built on top of older sites. And this is just my personal speculation from visiting these sites and looking at them and finding out that there's been Bronze Age burials underneath some of them, that I think the mound itself could be older as well. Because a prime example is York. So the city of York, it was known as Eboracon to the Celts. Ebor coming from the yew tree. A con means place, so it's like place of the yew tree. And the Romans changed it to Eboricum. And there's a tower there today on a similar mound, and it's called Clifford's Tower. And it's a circular building. And at the turn of the 1900s, they had to go and underpin the foundations to this tower, which was built in the Norman period, so sort of 1200 AD. And when they did that, they actually they already knew there was a Roman burial underneath it, because it was like a Roman cemetery was in the area as well. And when they actually dug underneath to underpin these foundations, they found a kist burial or a cist burial, which is kind of like, 4 slabs enclosing a Bronze Age body. And they called it at the time, they said it was like a native burial as opposed to a Roman one. So it was certainly a pre-Roman, and they dated it to around the Bronze Age, late Bronze Age. So kind of bell beaker culture, I suppose that would be classed as. And it's amazing.
And I also remember, go ahead, sorry.
No, sorry, you go.
I was going to say, I also remember reading that, like, when the Romans came to London, or what would become Londinium, part of the reason they left a plaque or something that said that this was kind of like always, they recognized this ancient history as like always a place of trade. Like, this had been, already wildly inhabited well before the Romans had even come to London. Is that true? Or
I'll have to have a look at that. I don't actually know about the plaque in London, I'm afraid. But I'll have a look and I'll get back to you, because that would be interesting piece of info.
Right. There's so much craziness with that stuff. One thing we're looking at is kind of how this, what we see with a lot of European kind of religions, like the Celtic religions and the Druidic religions, right? They become supplanted by Christian culture, and there's sort of this process of hiding away all these mysteries, right? This is something that we're kind of really interested in on our channel, is trying to expose and look at how these mysteries were encoded and whatnot, and how they got passed down or how they were revived. And what we see in England especially is kind of like, you guys have such a strong tradition around the Arthurian legends, around the Irish epics involving Maeve and such, as well as the Welsh epics involving Bran and Branwen. And how do you guys see this kind of mythology? You know, what happens when when Christianity kind of starts to come into play in England? How does this all, you know, because like when we're looking at in France, we've been doing our big research into France, and there's so much extreme persecution. Is that similar in the UK?
Well,
or
I think, well, just to start that off, I think there's definitely a dialogue going on between particularly Brittany and Britain, and between the Normans and, you know, there's always been cultural exchange. They're right next to each other. I mean, when you look at a map, they're really close. And so these cultures are very similar. I would just like to make a comment first on perceptions about the Druids. Now, we can say from a scientific perspective or an archaeological perspective, we can only know so much. We can only know what we can dig up. We only know from other people's sources. However, there's a lot we can infer. You know, there's no religion or society in isolation. We can look at what's going on around everybody. And what brings me back to the thing that allows this culture to be verbal is that the symbols are all up there. They're all worshipping trees, poles, stars, sun, moon. It's all the same stuff. And because those things have a kind of a meaning, we can infer what they were doing to a wide extent. Obviously, different taste, different geography will interfere with that and give different cultural properties. So what was your question again? Sorry, snappy.
Yeah, because the big debate here basically is, you know, when Christianity comes in, there's a lot of debate, especially in modernity. We're re-looking at this whole Christianization of Europe and actually what happened. And it seems to be in some places more violent than speculated, in other places far less violent than speculated. And there's been a lot of debate about ancient traditions surviving into modern times. You know, like there's so much within, like it becomes so contested, especially with the UK, because by the end of the 18th century, early 19th century, you have such a wild revival of traditional belief systems. You know, you have the rise of Wicca, you have the Temple of Diana, you have people like Robert Graves by the 40s writing like the White Goddess. You have this huge revival of interest, and a lot of it is pseudo-academic. And but at the same time, I question academics, because it's also, these are real people, real beliefs that historically existed. So what is your perspective on this revival? How does this come about? Is it suppressed? What's going on? I know it's a big one.
So I think first of all, you've got to look, I've got a cool little story here, but you've got to look back to the Romans. It was even before Christianity. The Romans came in and got rid of the Druids. I lived on an island off Anglesey where I'd crippled myself from an injury. So I went to this remote island called Cubby Island. And I'd said to my girlfriend, I'm going to try and grind up some acorns and brew, like roast them like coffee and try and brew them into an alcoholic drink. See what that tastes like a whiskey. So I went to look for acorns, but I couldn't find any. I'm like, where's all the effing oak trees? Well, this island had been one of the last strongholds of the Druids. They were all like piled in there before the Romans slaughtered them. And in fact, they'd cut down all the oak trees. So that's why even now there are so few there.
Wow.
And so there was a fort on this island and one of the oldest churches in the UK. And I would say more megaliths on that island than anywhere else in the UK, which is pretty famous for megalithic structures and burial mounds and stuff. So the saint of the island, Cubby, had all this mythology attached to him. He was called, he had a friend who was clearly his opposite. One was yellow faced and the other was yellow necked, because they were walking to other sides of the island to go to church, to go and do the sermons or whatever. And I'm like, this is very sun and moon. There are, you know, we're getting at cycles here. And lo and behold, when I looked into everything, I found so much occult stuff, you wouldn't believe it. His grandfather was called Solomon, lived in Cornwall, was known for mining tin. You know, it's just a whole collection of these old you could call them folk tales, but it's a mix, really, isn't it, between history and necessary information. But yeah, so I think it starts there. This Cubby had been a Celtic Druidic priest and converted to Christianity, and they'd become a church builder. Well, of course, his grandfather Solomon, mythologically, he's a church builder, and so it was. And on the island, he's built all these churches and left symbols of his occultism, like things like I don't know if you're aware of Sheila na gig, like a lady opening a vagina up. Well, we can get into that later.
I've seen those images. You also see there's the constant image of the green man that's ever present in Gaelic art, in a lot of churches and stone churches and such. And you have to wonder about some of this, right?
Well, I actually decoded it all so far as Sheila na gig goes, and we'll find out what that is when we look at Dee's work later on. We've got to the heart of it.
Sounds good. I can't wait. I have got some information about the early Christianity in the British Isles.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So obviously, as Ryan just said, when the Romans came over, they obviously cut the groves down, and as he says, that Anglesey was supposed to be the last stronghold of the Druids. So Tacitus writes about that if you want to check out about the groves. But it seems Christianity, the first people that were meant to sort of convert, it was the Anglo-Saxons were sort of converting to Christianity. Now, I mean apostolic Christianity here, because the Celtic people, they had Celtic Christianity first, which was a different type of Christianity. And it's strangely linked to Simon Magus, because in the mythology you have this druid called Mugrith, and he apparently goes and trains with Simon Magus and spends, a certain amount of time. He takes his daughter over as well, and apparently Simon Magus's sons have kids with his daughter and stuff, and there's, this kind of thing going on. And the call Mogruth, it means mage of the wheels, because Mug just means magus, and the Ruth means, they say that it's cognate with retarum in Latin, which means wheels. So it's like mage of the wheels. So first I was thinking, is it something to do with astrology, or is it, observing the stars, or is it actually these kind of wheels, the Trohiskos? And anyways, this mythology is embedded into Celtic Christianity. And when the Saxons were trying to get the Britons and the Picts to convert to apostolic Christianity, there's some letters that have been written in around about 700, 800 AD, and it's from some high up people, some clerks, some priests. They were trying to send them to the king of Dumnonia, which is, kind of like the Cornwall, southwest coast region, and to Necton, king of the Picts. And it basically says, in a nicey way, it's kind of saying you need to observe the correct date of Easter, you need to fall in line with the Apostolic Church, and you need to stop cutting your hair in the Simon Magus tonsure, which is described, it's kind of like a strip of hair going ear to ear with the rest of the back of the head shaved. And if you look at the Mesheke Jerovice bust, which is a Celtic bust discovered in what's modern-day Czech Republic, it actually has this hair described. Cuchulainn, in the mythology, he's got a similar haircut himself, Cuchulainn. And in the mythology, Cuchulainn has a raven-feathered mantle, which was passed down from Simon Magus. And so he's in the mythology.
That's wild.
Times.
So just so our audience knows, Cuchulainn, this is sort of like the great Irish hero, correct?
Yeah, he's a warrior that basically fights off a whole army by himself.
He's kind of like the Heracles or Indra of the Irish epics, right?
Yep. And his name, Cu, that's the same as Cuchulainn in Greek, the hound, dog. So his name means the hound of Cuchulainn, who's the smith. And he basically gets into these frenzies. And the frenzies he goes into, it's like a frenzy. His eyes, it says his mouth opens like a snake. When he's described, he's got all his serpentine qualities. Says his mouth opens like a snake. His hairs stand on end like lightning. He breathes fire.
Does he drink a special drink to get into this frenzy?
They always drink a special drink.
There is one instance, right, where he's weak and he's wounded, and a she comes along. He does this shout on the mountain, where he shouts in the 4 directions, right? And then the she, which it's interpreted as fairy these days, but when you look back in the old dictionaries from the 1700s, they're not fairies. It says that they brought knowledge of astrology, metallurgy, and whatever to Ireland. And anyways, one of his she friends comes and gives him these herbs and wraps it around his cup, and he goes into like a deep sleep for 2 days or something. And then when he wakes up, he's fully. It says he's ready to go for a tryst with a woman in a pub. It says he's got the energy. That's how they describe it.
For those of us who are into the mythology, there should be some huge red flags ticking. You got the drugs, the going into a coma-like death state, the waking up in a crazed, right? You have this mythological feminine figure that comes from above that brings knowledge. Wow, I love that. That's amazing. Interesting stuff. So Dion and I have been involved in this project over, a long while now, where we've been looking at a lot of these authors and how they encode, pagan spirituality and pagan religion. And Dion, I want you to speak about this, because we did a whole episode on Shakespeare, because Shakespeare is littered with this kind of mystery, is he not?
Well, you guys were talking about, or y'all were talking about how Christianity came to the island and suppressed pagan beliefs. I would posit that Shakespeare, the people around Shakespeare, the concept of Shakespeare, not the person, but the concept of Shakespeare itself, is the bringing back of that pagan mythology, Christian alchemy, we could call it. It's the rebirth of this pagan knowledge encoded into poetry, into arts. And I know that Ryan Seven's into this in terms of bacon, because when we did the episode, I came across so many different authors that would say that it's not Shakespeare. It could be Edward de Vere. It could be Bacon. It could be Edward Kelly. It could be even a few others. It could be all of them teamed up.
But it's very clear, at least from my reading of several of these different Shakespeare works that we went to in depth. Like we looked at the big one we looked at was Titus Andronicus. It's clear death and resurrection magic, and he's referencing this dark Saturnian blood magic. And those who know what's going on, it's everywhere there. Or the other one we looked at was what's that called? There's so many of them, but so many of these, there's so much magic going on in Shakespeare. It's undeniable to me that, regardless of the origins of where this is coming from, this work is designed to encode information for those who can understand it. Like the stage is an astrological chart. All of the plays have all of this astrology encoded. The numerology, the Pythagorean numerology is all there. Like, what do you think, Ryan?
Well, I mean, so it's this big question mark. Personally, I mean, from all the codes I've seen, it's mostly Edward de Vere, who's the author. He's the one that's pointed to most often. But there's a cadre around him, starting with John Dee, Bacon's surely involved. It won't be just one guy. It's said often about Shakespeare's plays that sometimes from page to page, the author seems to change. Like for a couple of pages, that wit seems to have gone. Oh, he is back again here on, on this next page. Yeah, it is a revival of the old pagan knowledge. It is this Saturnian understanding. It all relates to time, and yeah, it's been pulled together to reshare the information with an eye to puzzles and riddles, as was very popular at the time. Not forgetting John Dee was a cryptographer. But this question around the authorship's been around since the beginning. It's not like it's just a modern thing. It's certainly getting more prominent now and more part of the mythology. But this question around the authorship's always been there, even at the time.
That's true. It's just that largely, from what I've read, it gets dismissed as classism, which is a huge factor in a lot of this stuff. But it also could be a reason why Shakespeare wouldn't have written it, right? Because, you're a working class chap from Northern England at that time. How are you getting access to all? Like, I don't mean it in a negative way, but how do you get access to all of that information?
Well, I would like to say, let's start this way. Let's start this investigation with Auldboy. Auldboy went to somewhere. I don't know if it's the birthplace, the church, the graveyard, the burial place, but I know he got in a car and drove halfway across England to go check out this mystery. So this is where we start.
Right. So yeah, Auldboy, so when we did our Shakespeare episode, you also messaged us and you found you had an old copy of a Shakespeare play in your possession. Was it Adonis and Venus?
That's right, yes. Yep. It was it's been in my wife's family for quite a while, actually. I think it was like a grandmother had it, and it had been passed down, and it's tiny. It's absolutely tiny. Think about it. Yeah, this is it.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Incredible.
He was a very short man, William Shakespeare. Tiny hands.
That's it. But I'll tell you, that's it starts off. There's a Latin inscription in the beginning, which mentions Apollo, and literally the first line, you've got the purple.
Come on.
It's like the first or second line.
Let's hear this. That's just wild.
Even as the sun with purple-coloured face hath taken his last leave of the weeping morn, rose-cheeked Adonis hied him to the chase.
Oh no!
Not even 2 seconds, and you got the mystery.
Yeah. Did everybody else notice that was a bottom then, didn't they? No, just me realised that was a bottom he was talking about. Read that again if you don't mind, and think the rear instead of think somebody's rear.
Well, purple bottoms are a thing.
Yeah, there we go. Even as the sun with purple-coloured face has taken his last leave of the weeping morn, rose-cheeked Adonis hied him to the chase. Hunting he loved, but love he laughed to scorn.
Sounds like there's purple stuff coming from somebody's anus.
Like 3 or 4 mentions of the purple in there as well. And
that's just beautiful. That's just wild. So after we had talked and you showed me that, we had even been talking about, wouldn't it be great if someone could go check out some of these sites? And it turns out, like, you're not too far from Stratford, right?
Yeah, it's like maybe 3-4 hours drive. I mean, it's quite far on the scale of Great Britain, but I mean, compared to how much you can travel in your countries, it's
right.
It's a millimeter.
Yeah, 3 or 4 hours is not far distance in Canada. But no, okay, yeah, that would be far for the UK. But you actually went to Stratford on Avon, and we got some footage of your Shakespeare tour. So would you mind if I showed some of that video, guys? All right, so let me just bring some of this up here. Okay. All right, so we'll just start this and we'll give it a go. So is that the original house then?
Yeah, so this is where he was born, yes.
Wow.
So it's slap bang in the centre of town.
They've really maintained everything. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, because it's wooden as well. A lot of it's wood. So it's surprising it's still around.
Right?
These are just like all artifacts that he was said to have used, you know, his drinking vessel, things like that, his effect.
I know they found a clay pipe with cannabis in it in a nearby garden to that house. I think in the adjacent street.
I do remember reading that. People made a big deal of it. Oh, interesting.
That's where he packed his pipe.
We're actually doing a little bit of a play as well later, so it was nice to catch that.
Wow.
Is that wallpaper?
Yeah. Expensive.
I'm just thinking how they were making wallpaper in those days, yeah.
I think it was like a knitted fabric, you know,
Right.
rather than a paper.
Yeah, the natural, yeah. It's funny how not much has really changed, though. You know, we've got a few white goods knocking around the house and double glazing, but not much has changed, really. You don't have to go to the toilet outside the upstairs window. That's about it.
Yeah, no one's throwing their stuff out the window anymore.
We're doing a bit of the Merchant of Venice here as well.
When was this taken?
Maybe around a month ago.
Yeah, you had just had a new baby at the time, so big appreciation for doing
Oh,
this.
wow.
Oh no, it's okay, honestly. You know, I'm happy to help out, you know.
We love it. It's amazing. I love seeing this. It puts you right into the feel of the place, you know.
That's it. This was a statue down by the dock, down by the lock.
Oh, cool.
There's your severed head motif.
Sorry. Wow, that's so Bacchic.
One of the four winds.
These are just some of the old streets next to his birthplace.
It's amazing how they maintain all those buildings.
Mhm.
You said they're all out of wood. That can't be easy.
No. But as you can see, he's embedded into the very fabric of the town itself.
Mm.
Right. Regardless of what the truth of Shakespeare is, William is not going anywhere anytime soon. Right?
Yeah, it often confounds me that so many scholars refuse to look at these codes, because they are clear. Once you actually understand them, they are clear. So why the academic world is so intent on... I mean, look how many occultists from Bacon to Isaac Newton have literally changed the world from these isles. And why won't academics take the non-public work seriously? You know, they were doing something. There are things in here. They were hiding the most important stuff. They weren't releasing it out into the public. So it often confounds me why, you know, British society hasn't taken seriously the point of Edward de Vere, or even just Bacon, or anybody. It's always derided. It's always sneered at. It's always put your tinfoil hats on, guys.
I mean,
Well,
magic is
this
something that's always
battle,
been.
if I could say one thing, is known as the Oxfordians versus
And Staffordshire guys, isn't it?
yeah, the Shakespeareans. You have a group of people that are fighting over authorship. But what I would like to say is that regardless of the authorship, Shakespeare had to be a good actor to perform this, to bring it forth, to make it famous, to make it palatable. So with that theory, people would say that he was a hired actor and that he didn't write the plays. But regardless, I know there's so much information encoded in there. We talked about astrology. There's mathematics. There's Greek history. There's politics dealing with Protestant and Catholic issues. There's the stuff dealing with the kings and queens, Scottish and English stuff. The politics are so deep in there. That's a lot of that stuff goes over my head. This is stuff that you gentlemen studied in high school and as kids. All this English politics.
My favorite work by Shakespeare in terms of the magical essence has to be The Tempest. Just because if you read between the lines in The Tempest, the wizard puts on a show. It's literally designed as a rehabilitation of his character, where he's asking at the very end of the play, do you believe my story? Is it good enough for me to come back home? Can I be no longer exiled to this magical island? The whole idea is he's encoding you the whole idea of what plays are and literature is. It is a projection of an idea. It is a magical conjuring of history. It has nothing to do with literal truth. It's all about perception. So at the end of the story, we don't know who Prospero is. We just have the magical story he's told us. But do you buy it? Did you fall for it? And it's literally a wink and nudge. He ends the play with a wink and nudge. It's like, it's so beautiful, you know?
All I know about that is that I just think about Data in Star Trek every time it is he did that same play and just dressed up in a ridiculous way. But again, I don't know much about Shakespeare's play themselves apart from what is in British culture. What I understand is what's behind these work. What did he put into those Shakespearean plays? That's I think.
Let's get into that. You sent me some slides here that I'll just bring up, Ryan. And why don't you discuss some of this? So what is going on with Shakespeare's works?
Yeah. So famously by characters such as Alexander Waugh and my mate Alan Green, who I might send some snippets of this to, because I've found a couple of things that he won't have seen. So I had in preparation for this, I had a quick look through Shakespeare's stuff, and here's what I found. So one of the first things is that these famous frontispieces, these front pages, which have this stuff encoded in them, well, if you look at that first image, you can see it's basically made up of several 3, 4, 5 Pythagorean triangles, which are part of these geometric mysteries. Straight away, that says to me, right, we're in the area of geometry and mathematics and things like that. I'm not going to go too deeply into the maths tonight, but there is one important thing that I'm going to go into later. So in the central version of that sonnets, we have Alan Green's figuring out that within this shape are several mathematical measurements based on square roots and things like that. But within that, you get the foot, the meter, etc. I can't read it; it's too small on my. In fact, let me put it up here. So you get the foot, the cubit, the meter, and another meter there. There's all kinds of other things in there too. Euler's number, things not discovered for hundreds of years are in there, including the meter, which wasn't used. And Euler's number, which I think is late 1700s. I'm not sure. So there's always certain things I'm looking for, and one of them is a pattern that I found, which you can see in the right hand version, the tilted version. And if you look up, and that looks very complex. So I've done a simple version. There are two circles above it. One is the original, and the one on the right is the lines drawn as my pattern would draw it. So they're actually very, very slightly out. They're not quite perfect, but they're so close, it told me I'm onto something. Now, moving on. We'll get into why all these things are important. So if we can go on to the next image. Right, these are, so John Dee, and John Dee's Rosicrucianism clearly bleeds into Shakespeare's works. So I'm just going to show you a few little things about it, and then we can see what is wanted to encode. Now, so these are John Dee's famous Enochian tables on the left. And these were divined with his mate, Edward Kelly. They were taking all kinds of substances, talking to angels, and they made these tables from it. Now, if we look on the right-hand column of this table, we'll see I've asterisked certain numbers on this table: 24, 72, 144, 216, 288, 360, 432, 504, and then we've got 624 at the bottom. 624 is very important to the actual Shakespeare codes. That's Shakespeare's birthday and Midsummer's Day, and it's often reversed to 426. If you look further up, 426 is on there, 624 is on there, and 246. There's all kinds of variations. Now, why is that important? Well, it goes back to Dion's recent obsession with the number 9. All of those columns, all those important numbers add up to 9. Like 504, 5 and 4 is 9. 624 adds up to 9. So, how does it? That one. Some of them don't. Some of them it's 3, 6, or 9, but the important ones all add up to 9. Now, why? John Dee shows this in his famous Monas Hieroglyphica book, the table for which is on the top right-hand corner. And we can see in the left square of that top right-hand corner, we've got numbers 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But they're not in an order. They're not in the normal order. And where's the number 9? Well, just like we've been discovering, the number 9, the numbers all have characteristics in the way that they interact with each other mathematically. And Dee's explained this by these columns, and we'll see they always add up to 9. You're crossing from one side to the other. So 8 at the top left, 1 at the bottom right, 9. 7 and 2, 9. 6 and 3, 9. 3 and 4, 3 and 4, whatever it is. 5 and 4, 9. So why is that? Well, when you look at the qualities of these numbers and the way they add and multiply and what results you get, those two numbers are literally the opposites of each other and behave in this way. You might be familiar with vortex mathematics, where 3 and 6 are a pole around the number 9. Well, that 9 is written at the top as horizon eternitas, the eternal horizon. And that's because the number 9 seems to vanish. Whenever you do calculations with 9, you'll always get 9 returned. 9 times 2 is 18, 1 and 8 is 9, gets returned. And this happens with the whole 9 times table. This is why they're obsessed with 9. There are more things in that table that we won't discuss right now, but he's getting at the meaning and utility of number.
Right.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, go on, Tappy.
I was going to say, yeah, there's so much here. I was just going to remind people that, you know, like in the ancient Greek number system, we know that 1, 3, 7 and 9, these are the numbers of the goddesses. All the prime numbers are always highlighted, and they represent, like if you look at the Saturn square, the cross of the Saturn square is 1, 3, 7, 9 with 5 in the middle, you know, and you're seeing this kind of stuff complexify and get even more intense under Dee and his mathematical genius, you know, which is many generations later. But it's similar kind of magic, right? Yeah,
actually, it's very simple. I mean, I'm able to burst through this somewhat because it's actually simple. You don't need to memorize everything. You just need to know numbers do things when they go with each other. And there are certain numbers that are more important, more harmonic than others. Now, what we've done so far is detail that there are these numbers, and they're in that column of Dee's work, and he's explained the reason why they're like this with the thing that I've just gone through. Now, that all aside, John Dee's famous Sigillum Dei Ameth, which he used to conjure spirits and all sorts and encode these things, and that Sigillum Dei Ameth is this 7-sided star in the bottom right corner. and that refers back to this table. Now, if we go to the next image.
If I could say one thing real quick while you do that, some context. So people know that John Dee was the court astrologer in England. He would do his astrological tables, consulted for war when they were going to go to war against France. He would draw up astrological charts. And part of how he did it was through his scryer, Edward Kelly. He had a buddy that would stare into a black stone and consult spirits. And this number 624, if I'm not mistaken, Green says that number is the key to Shakespeare's grave.
Yes.
At Shakespeare's grave, using that number 624, you can encode some mysteries, or there's some hidden puzzles there as well. So take over, my friend.
I also just wanted to add. I just want to add one thing about John Dee in terms of occult history and significance. What's so important about him and what is claimed by many modern occultists, especially of the British persuasion, is that Dee is responsible for empire, and he claimed as such, right? He did magic in order to create empire, and he did magic in order to destroy the Spanish Armada, which did happen in a storm for which he took credit. Now, whether any of that's true, use your own judgment and your own reason, but I thought it was important to mention because he's at the heart of so many conspiracies about globalization and the British Empire,
Yeah, he was the original 007. He signed his signature for the Queen's eyes, 2 O's for the eyes, and a number 7 across the top for a hand shading the eyes so nobody else could see. So that's where Fleming got 007 from. Anyway,
oh, interesting.
It's cool, isn't it? So now, knowing all this stuff about Dee, we refer back to Shakespeare's sonnets. Now, Alexander Waugh found the Chi-Rho symbol there, that PX symbol, which I've spoke about in many other podcasts. But essentially, what it's pointing to is precession and the wobble of the axis of the Earth. We'll get into this momentarily. Now, Alexander Waugh also made the image on the right-hand side by flipping things around on this second page, the frontispiece, and doing lots of decoding. There's lots of De Vere's in there and things like that. But from there, the best signifiers that Dee's been at this work is the constant use of IHS, because he was a Christian mystic, don't forget. He might have been doing all his pagan stuff, but he was deeply rooted in Christianity. He was using the IHS and the PX symbol, the RX, the Chi-Rho symbol. Now, it's gematria. And I've listed the gematria in this central column. I did this yesterday, so it's a bit scruffy. However, I've highlighted what the numbers that I got out of it. Again, we've got these same numbers that were in that right-hand column of Dee's work. In bright red, 432, in yellow, 440, 144, 108, 360. And then we get, if we go far enough down that column, we get 25, 9, 20, a precessional year, this very important number. The only number that I think is more important than that is 5040, which is all over this work, but not something we're going to get in today. That's Plato's favorite number. But 25,920 is how many years it takes for this wobble of the Earth to happen. And that Chi-Rho symbol is the symbol of that precessional movement. Let's go to the next image, please, Snappy. We're rollicking through here. So here we go. We can see where we get this PX from. I'll keep calling it a PX. I know it's an RX. In this left image, it's essentially where the ecliptic and the Earth crosses at spring equinox and the autumn equinox. It's basically the sun going around the Earth, but put simply. Now, the Earth has another movement, and that is it's off at an axis at an angle and spins around like a spinning top that slows. And those, if we look in the right-hand circle, those stars that pole points at changes over 25,920 years. So most of it is around Draco, which is why we get Draco as the symbol of time, this Ouroboros serpent eating itself. Now, if we break that circle of 25,920 years down into periods of normal time here on Earth in a year, in a day, you get 72 degrees. In a week, it's 504. A month 2016, a year 25,920. These are these same numbers that are in Dee's work. These same numbers. He's going IHS. It's this gematria. He's showing you with this PX. It's so much redundancy in there. He's like really pointing you at this stuff. Now, if we go on to the next image, John Dee had a famous sigil, which he wrote a whole book on, called Monas Hieroglyphica, in which he said he'd constrained all the knowledge of the universe into one shape, into one sigil. The sigil is there, looking a lot like Mercury's symbol on the left, very astronomical, alchemical looking. When you work out the geometry on this left image, is again worked out by Alexander Waugh, you get a squared circle where the perimeter of the circle is the same as, sorry, the perimeter of the square is the same as the circumference of the circle. It's an old ancient riddle and was difficult to solve. Now, when I was in Wales, when I found all that Druidic stuff that we were talking about before, I also discovered this pattern in the tarot and in other places and in Sheila na Gig. Now, it's the same as that D pattern. It is if you look for the square, you can see the square in mine. The circles are in the same place. Everything's in the same place. Mine's just more explicit and there's more of it out there. It's also based on a seven-sided shape. Now, because a seven-sided shape's unequal, I've had to flip it round so I get an equal shape out of it. But that pattern on the right is essentially a seven-sided shape. Referring back to John Dee's Sigillum Dei Ameth. What's so special about this? Well, when you plug those numbers that we've been obsessing over into this pattern, if we go on to the next, well, we'll show you that in a minute, what happens when you plug things in. But many pieces of art are drawn to this pattern. If you look at John Dee's shoulders there, you can see everything lines up, the shape of his head, the shape of his beard. There's so many artworks drawn with this pattern. I've got thousands of them from these eras. You've got to look for occultists, but it's there. If you look at Queen Liz there, her head's the same. There's so many things drawn with this pattern. The only thing that's not on there drawn to this pattern is her scepter. And that's actually at the angle of the tilt of the earth. So you can see that. So if we go on to the next one, I'm trying to get through this so I don't bore anybody. What happens when you put those numbers into that pattern that's drawn from the Sigillum Dei Ameth? Well, you get the size of the earth, the size of the moon. You eventually get the size of the sun and the size of the planets and the distance of the planets. It's literally the harmony of the spheres, guys. It's like whenever I look at occultism, and I look for the central secrets, whatever I'm looking at, yes, there's always drugs and sex and prophecy and all these other things, but it's this stuff that's always there. Okay, big deal, Ryan. Yeah, the sun, the moon. I mean, that is a massive deal. However, moving on swiftly, because I realize other people want to talk. Well, it builds the pyramid. It's the same as Stonehenge. You look at any of those circles, any of it all is. So let's take a quick look. So if we look at the pyramid, we'll see there's the perimeter of, there's like a pink heptagon, seven-sided shape, and a green one. Let's look at the pink one. You can see the lines follow there. There's a big yellow circle at the top of it, which kisses the inside. There's a larger blue circle, which denotes the top of it. There's, if you look at the angle of the shafts inside, they all follow with a green line. There's actually a more complex version of this pattern that I won't show because it's difficult to look at. This is difficult enough, but everything's accounted for. Even shafts I previously thought were just literally pointed at stars. It's all accounted for. We move on to Stonehenge on the right.
Oh, sorry.
We can see all of the stones have a line at the extremity of them, those central stones. If we look at the ring of stones are on the outside, one of those circles will follow the ring. You can look in the center of the ring and see the circles follow. There's no part of this which doesn't have a line adjacent to it.
And we know that the henge is aligned to the stars because they were out there last weekend for the alignments. People go out there to the henge and it aligns to the sun. It's a calculator.
Yeah, and the pyramids famously so. So that all said, how far does this go back? Now, this is, if we go on to the next image, please, Snappy. This is where it gets deep and a little more speculative. But if we if we look at the horn of this cave painting from 40,000 years ago, you can see that it follows that circle. If you look at his horn, where his eye is, also his eyes at 2 meeting points. If you look up, his bum's actually triangular and fit perfectly into the triangle at the end of the pattern. If you look where his legs, his hind legs finish, it looks to me, for all intents and purposes, this thing is drawn, and I've got a few other examples of this as well, but this is one of my favorites, that this thing's drawn to this pattern. Now, I've certainly found it at Göbekli Tepe. Like, I'm positive about this. This is a little more speculative. But if you look at his snout, that exact angle of the end of his snout is in line with the pattern. The where his feet finish is literally either on a circle or on a square. There's almost nothing there that isn't perfectly aligned with that pattern. So I don't know what to say about that, actually, because that's like, this is a technology from an ancient past survived. If everyone's been looking for an ancient high civilization technology, I'd say this is it. And to add verisimilitude to it, it wasn't just me that knew about this. The more I look into it, John Dee knew about it. Other people have known about it. The pyramid builders know about it. It's not just Taro or wherever else I've found it.
No, right?
So,
well, this is something that they've been encoding in all of these various mystery traditions since the beginning. It seems to have something clearly to do with magical projection and prediction of the future and the setting up of future events. You know, if John Dee is to be believed, he managed to create empire using this, right?
New Atlantis idea, isn't it?
You know, if I could say one thing, these caves are some of the oldest paintings that they have, cave paintings on the planet, as well as the rituals that were taking place in those caves. Since today is Easter and it's Eucharist, they were doing Eucharist type activities in those caves in Spain that dealt with life and death, rebirth, fertility. And the henge, Stonehenge, is aligned to this time of year, to the equinox and solstices, to precession of equinox, to those numbers. And some people round it off to 26,000. The 29,560.
Yeah.
They'll round it off to 26,000, some people. But that number, you're going to find it in the Mayan calendar, in Egyptian mathematics, in the Vedic astrology.
I will say also about Stonehenge, Dion. I will say about Stonehenge that it's got the most mushroom graffiti of any ancient megalith out there. If you look, you can look with a black light. It's got, they say it's hammerheads, but it's clearly mushrooms. It's Amanita mushrooms. And around Stonehenge is the largest Amanita ring in all of Britain. Literally around the edge of it is a ring of Amanita muscaria.
I'm not surprised. I mean, mushrooms grow so plentiful in the UK. I'd be more surprised if you guys weren't doing them. Between Amanita and Liberty Caps, they're like everywhere. Just go out in your backyard, guys.
See Auldboy smiling there as well. Also, right, if I could just finish this presentation off, guys, this is the last image. So I'm shooting a documentary currently. I found these stones with what is actually another man-made mound with a round hill, with a round castle on top that people go and pray to the four directions to on Good Friday. They just did it. So there's a mystery there. But at the bottom of there are these pillars with all this information on again. Now, I've started to suspect that these pillars are something to do with John Dee, although they start off kind of as Templar repositories of information. The chapel that they were in originally survives a few generations and actually has 1603 written on there as its last date. Now, John Dee was still at Manchester University, which is just down the street, as the deacon or whatever he was doing there of Manchester University at the time. And the year after 1603, 1604 is supposed to be the first year that the Rosicrucians started. Now, this pillar has a wheel of fortune on it for the you know, whenever you get masters of the wheels, it's usually the wheel of fortune. We've got 72 in the top left corner in purple, which is one processional day. when I decoded the gematria of these letters, it says P, P, just nonsense. And I did the gematria, it says 624, and then it says 426 on it. And every one of these pillars, including this Wheel of Fortune, is based on that 7 pattern again, which you can see a Wheel of Fortune would normally have 8 spokes. Well, this one's got 7.
That's interesting. And you know, this Wheel of Fortune motif, right? This is so central to everything like Dion and I have been looking into with the Epicurean Lucifer stuff, because Fortuna, the goddess Fortuna or Tai Chi, is at the heart of a lot of these pagan cults. It seems to be that this is the one that these occultists are praying either to Fortuna or to Saturn, and sometimes they're considered a singular entity, sometimes they're different entities, but they're interrelated, right? Like, and you'll see this, like, we've talked a lot about the Solabusca Tarot. It's clearly the Solabusca Tarot is black magic that's invoking Fortuna and Saturn. Like, it's straight up, right? You see the wheel everywhere. You see that the death of Orpheus imagery in that, and
purple snail shells.
Right. This also connects to a lot of the stuff that we see going on in France, because a big thing that's happening with France is Queen Isabeau is she was the queen under Charles V, I believe, or is it? Yeah, Charles V. And she was originally a Visconti from Italy. And she brings a lot of this magic into France. And after... and this leads to the whole craziness of the 100-Year War and potentially the rise of Joan of Arc. Okay, well, Joan of Arc, I think, is part of this Christian pagan magic. Like Queen Isabeau's head magician is this woman, Christine de Pizan, who writes this book, The City of Ladies, which is all about invoking the goddess as Fortuna through the 3 muses, which she calls Lady Rectitude, Lady Reason, and Lady Justice. And it's like insanely powerful, crazy magic, all related to this stuff. Sorry to go on a tangent.
That's cool. You've not only gone on a tangent, you've gone completely snappy. Oh, you're back. I was going to say, well, interestingly, it was after Dee's reign, before Dee's reign, during the reign of Henry VIII, the Venetians come over, those same Visconti types, and fund Henry VIII's courts, which is considered to be the true beginnings of what became Dee's notions of the British Empire. All that information from the old world, from Byzantine Greece and Egypt, that would, finally collapsing, went over to Venice. That was where all the money was and where all the traders were. And then that money got bankrolled through what became the black nobility. I'm sure we've all heard of that. And came to Britain and funded Britain's early empire.
That's so wild. So what do you make of all this, old boy? What did you think of Ryan's presentation?
Nonsense.
No, not at all. Really interesting, because those numbers as well, like the 72, 720, etc. They also crop up in geometry as well. Like the angles of a triangle will add up to 720 degrees, for example. Sometimes with like different shapes, it's the 540, which you were talking about. So you start getting into the territory of, why were the Pythagoreans obsessed with numbers? And, they saw God as a number, type concept. And it's basically, what's the word? Intelligent design in nature, I suppose, is how you would.
The Masons have it too, and the way they see it is that it's the reason for that G is because G is the 7th letter of the alphabet. It's all that 7, and 7 factorial adds up to 25, 9, 20, or is it 50, 40? One of those two numbers. 7 factorial is like 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times. They're all getting at the same stuff, and it is all in the shapes. The Pythagorean pentagram that they all apparently had on the hand that they showed each other. Well, the angles of that are like 108 and 72. As you say, it is totally in geometry. It's in music. It's in the planets. It is literally the harmony of the spheres. And I mean, I can't imagine a greater secret. And it is essentially, as they're putting it, God's fingerprint. You don't see God like the Christian God, but this abstract thing. But it's what it looks like.
I personally,
I'm kind of an atheist. Well, a not surist, but that's what it looks like to me.
I also noticed as well that your early letters seem to come from the shapes that you can find in geometry as well. Like if you bisect a circle by 12 points and you trace the shape using the outside of the circle and the lines, you get a lot of these early, certainly the Futhark and Futhark of the.
I was wondering that because I was thinking about your work on the Colburn and the Futhark, these runic systems for divination, and they seem to correspond to these astrological charts and to some of these numbers that Ryan is giving. Like you should definitely look deeper into this, Auldboy. I think you'll find more connection.
Because when I was using the grid in the circle to find the letters, the unicursal hexagram is in there. And so is the Knights Templar sort of cross shape as well.
That's really cool. That cross shape of the Knights Templar is actually to the arc. If you take the tines of the cross, the widen, don't they, at the bottom?
Yeah.
Well, if you take the width that goes across and put a pendulum down to the bottom of that circle and swing a pendulum that width, that's a second. There's exactly a second. And so, the length of it should be, a meter. So again, it's geometry and wonderful things.
Wow. That's so taking all this back to sort of this idea of pagan tradition revival in the UK, when I was looking into Shakespeare in this occult stuff, something that continuously comes up, and again, this is mostly conspiracy by Christians, but I'd love your perspective on this, is that they blame Shakespeare for this occult revival in Britain and the rise of people like Crowley and Wicca and whatnot. And they specifically cite things like Midsummer's Night Dream and The Tempest and Macbeth, the more occulted works. What do you guys think of this? Do you think Shakespeare played a role in the later revival that we see at the turn of the 19th century?
Well, I do have something interesting to say regarding that. And I think it also alludes to the fact that Shakespeare, whether he was a person or whether he was an amalgamation from different sources, he's got something to do with obviously the upper echelons of society. Because there's a lot of stately homes where I live, and we've got a historic houses card. So you pay a membership for the year. You can go to any in the country and check them out. And a lot of them, the kind of post-Norman era, they maybe range from 15, 16, 1700s, that kind of period. And I'm going around them all, and everything is just Greek mythology. And not just surface level Greek mythology. It's also like you would have to have read obscure things. You would have to know the mysteries, because I've seen in numerous houses the image of the bound initiate drinking the milk from the breast of a woman, and I've seen it in two places. So they've got it's a Greco-Roman style temple that they've built in this water garden, and it's 10 minutes down the road from me. There's an old abbey there, an old Saxon abbey, and then over the years different things were built on the site, and I've completely lost my train of thought there. What was I just saying? I've completely lost my train of thought.
The lactognosis. Statue with the lactognosis. That's freaking wild.
And they've built this water garden, and it's got a big pond called the Selene Pond, and it's a moon. And then there's two crescent ponds either side. In the middle, they've got Poseidon, they've got Hercules, Aphrodite, Bacchus, and then they've got a temple called the Temple of Fame. And you go in the Temple of Fame, and right on the back wall, you've got a circle, and there's the bound initiate. His wrists are bound, and he's suckling the milk from the priestess. And then in another one, you go into the bathroom, and apparently in this era, they're wallpapered up to a certain height, and that's where the women's eyes could look in the bathroom. And then above it, they have this place reserved with kind of like hangers for pictures. And the reason they say, this is where the gentleman had rude pictures, and that's how they were trying to pass off the breastfeeding image. But I was there and I'm like, this just ain't a rude picture. This is, it's mystery, you know what I mean? And it's everywhere. And then you find out that a lot of these people were also Freemasons. Now, I'm not a Freemason. I don't know any Freemasons, so I don't really know anything about it. But so I don't know whether it's something to do with Freemasonry or whether it's separate. But they had these things called grand tours that these noble gentlemen went on, and basically they went around Greece and Rome, and they went and visited all these areas. And I mean, these are the rich echelons of society. And then they came back, and then they furnished the stately homes. And some of them, they've got shrines in them and everything, and the, you know, Greco-Roman gods and goddesses.
So in my local park, it's Egyptian, and it's Preston's very Masonic. There's lots of Masonic lodges, and not so much filled anymore, but they're definitely there. See, in Snappy, in the north of England, is where the Industrial Revolution started. So it was at the time, it was a kind of new money. So I think there was a look for some of the kudos that you get from knowing these things and joining the Masons and things like that, because there's no royal bloodlines or anything like that around here. It's poor people. So I was thinking, so around my park, it's there's a needle, an Egyptian needle there, an obelisk. All the benches are sphinxes with the boobs out. It's very similar, but just an Egyptian theme. The Masons took anything they could of the mysteries from anywhere, but initially they preferred Greek, and then a bit later became very much obsessed with Egypt, as Howard Carter did his stuff in the 1920s.
Yeah, so there seems to be... Go ahead, sorry, Ryan, finish.
I was going to say, Snappy, I think the main contention of your point was what caused this revival? And I think it was the Enlightenment, thinking about it. Yeah. So those guys were Rosicrucians, first of all, and then we were blessed with the scientific enlightenment, and then as it goes, the Industrial Revolution. Well, these ideas were carried beneath the surface the whole way by all these institutions, but that also had the effect of making Britain irreligious. Christianity took a dive a long time ago,
right?
You know, even in the poor places where I grew up, my parents didn't go to church. Their grandparents did, but there were still pockets of it. But it was the Enlightenment. And then what fills that vacuum? Well, it's Blavatsky, and then eventually Gardner, and, you know, all these other people, Gurdjieff, you know. But not forgetting all the famous alchemists that came between the Templars and, you know, the likes of Newton. You know, it's alchemy that kept the mysteries going, and there's lots of famous English alchemists. That then becomes the Enlightenment and science. It all feeds back into itself.
No, I think you're right, because when you look into the history, like you brought up the Masons, and, you know, the Masons are very Egyptian, and that comes out of the discovery of you know, the Rosetta Stone that took over everyone's minds and caused this massive religious fervor. Even the Mormons in America are subject to this. And this leads to a lot of occult revival. So that's certainly one key pillar. But if we also go even earlier to some of the earliest types of these secret societies, I'm immediately reminded of the Illuminati. And if you look at the true history of the Illuminati, Adam Weintraub was trying to do one thing, and that was spread Enlightenment values and spread democracy. And he felt that the only way, or the best way he could do this, was by convincing elite men, you know, and doing it through this revealing system, because these ideas were too controversial at the time, you know. And we saw what happened to Weintraub. He got killed, and the Illuminati got destroyed by the nobles of his time because their democratic values were not consistent with feudalism, right? So you're very much right. There is this push for enlightenment and equality, and that's also a huge part of these secret societies that we can't forget. And even to Auldboy's point about all of those rich kind of noble houses and all of the Greek stuff, I immediately think of like the Hellfire Club, which becomes notorious. But like they're spending millions of dollars building these elaborate Greek style retreats. Like there's a clear massive influence, right?
I mean, I think in Leeds or somewhere like that, there's a workhouse that's in the shape of Egyptian temples, you know, 4 big columns, and they were cotton milling there or something, you know. So even like the lower end things were constructed to these great ancient complexes. Well, why? Because those great ancient complexes were made to this same information they're getting about all these numbers and these Saturnian. It's Saturnian because it's all about time. It's that is if it comes from the cycle of the Earth, then it's about time. And Saturn, as we know, is the one that castrates infinity and allows for materiality and existence. And it's because of these breaks in reality, these breaks in time, these breaks in measurement, these one thing is not the same as the next thing, Saturnian idea. And you know, with that you build things. So of course the Masons would take on an idea like building stuff, Solomon's temple, building stuff. You know, so often it's either musicians that are at the heart of the occult or builders of some type, or general
Artists.
hero knight types. Yeah.
Right. It's always artists, and it's always, you know, it's like there's certain truths that can't be, you know, the more you study this kind of stuff, it doesn't. One of my favorite poets of all time is this guy, Madison Cuchulainn, and he talks about how he believes the pagan and Greco-Roman mysteries and the Christian mysteries and or what have you are just ways of encoding the same universal information. And he often talks in his poems, he goes, I will long for the day when we'll look at Christianity with the same way we look at ancient pagan rites and be like, yeah, there's some truth here, but this was just an attempt. You know, it was an attempt to understand that was limited, and we can move and evolve beyond it. You know, there's core elements that we can take with us from these ancient pasts. Like, I'm not saying abandon the past, but we need to take this and project it into the future, just like the magicians were doing. You know, we have to be mindful of this. I feel like so much of pagan thought, especially in our current time, is regressive. It's trying to recreate an imagined past. I have no idea. I have no interest in that. I want to know what these guys were doing in terms of the magic, because they were all about projecting into the future. When you read the ancients, you know, they were not invested in the ancient past. The ancient path is mystical and wishy-washy. They don't even know their ancestral lineages, right? Like, this was something that blew my mind talking to Dion. Dion spent time in Africa, right? And he went to a lot of these traditional shrines. And they have ancestor worship cults, but the cults are for the ancient ancestors, or a vague notion of the ancestors. They're not keeping detailed lists. You know, most of these rites are about asking the ancestors to help you into the future, you know, right, Dion?
That's right. That's right. Well, you know, definitely. Are you guys open to coming back for another episode?
Yeah, certainly.
Because we're barely getting started. You know, people are expecting us to go into hours of Aleister Crowley and Gerald Gardner, and we're barely getting started about.
I mean, I don't think we're even at the point where I don't even think we're at the point where English is formalized into the language we know yet, have we? We're still in Shakespearean English.
Yeah. You know, in this culture, I'd like to say some words for people to understand. Rosicrucian, Christian alchemy, Freemasonry. This is the birthplace of a lot of what New Age occultism that people are going to read and get into. Half these channels on YouTube, this is where it kind of starting. It's coalescing in France, in Germany, and other places. But there's a movement that's going on in England that gets transferred into theosophy. And that becomes the hot thing at the moment. And then you get Aleister Crowley, Golden Dawn, OTOs, different things going on. There's so many movements coming out of England.
When we talk about
spicy,
right?
It does have those Greco-Egyptian elements. Because I look at pictures of Aleister Crowley and he's wearing a pharaoh's turban, and so it's encoded into English culture. This Greco-Egyptian magic. When I look at old Beatles videos from the 60s, it has this occultism in it. And this is what we're scratching the surface of how it got into pop culture. into our movies, into our mythology. It went from Celtic Druids into pop culture.
Well,
You know, and another thing I'm looking at right now on my screen, I'm looking at Rowan Williams. You know who Rowan Williams is? He was the Archbishop of England. A couple years back, I think 2016, he stepped down, or 2017. And for people who don't know, that's like the Pope of England. Not Catholic, but Protestant style. He is also a Druid. He was given the honorary title of a Druid by the Druids of England. And so it shows me where England, you know, when I want to ask you guys, we're talking about the past, but what do you see the future of occultism in England?
Me and him.
Both of you, whoever goes first.
I mean, that's a good point, though, isn't it? Though, like, I do the fact. Okay, you guys are from the States and Canada, but you know, there seems to be the fact that you and I are from the north of England. There seems to be a lot of Northern English types. Like, I mean, I mentioned Alan Green before. He lives in LA, actually, Dion, but he's from Manchester. There's quite a few tarot guys I could think of that from around here. A few Scousers. Scousers of people from Liverpool, by the way. Yeah.
When I think of the most influential modern occultists, okay, 3 undisputable names of English origin come to mind. Number 1, and the most well-known, Aleister Crowley, which has been mentioned. On the cover of Sgt. Pepper's, created Thelema, Do What Thou Wilt. The most popular countercultural figure of modern times, I would say, right? Like his idea, calling himself the B666, he's endeared himself to the world and transformed our entire religious landscape for better or for worse. But there is no Crowley without 2 contemporaries of his that are of equal importance, and that would be Dion Fortune, who wrote her book about psychic battling of magic, which was hugely important, in her ideas about the Occult Battle of Britain, and her groups have had tremendous impact on the New Age movement. And then the other one I would bring up that a lot of people neglect to talk about is A.E. Waite. A.E. Waite was a member of the Golden Dawn. He is the co-creator of the most popular tarot deck of all time, the Rider-Waite Pamela Coleman Smith deck. And he also famously translated the works of Eliphas Levi into English. And his translations are still the only English translations of Eliphas Levi's work, right? Not to mention his own work on this subject. And like, it's hard to stress how much the Golden Dawn and Golden Dawn systems of magic in Thelema have related everything. And then chaos magic, people like Austin Osman Spar. Yep. You can even argue modern occultists like people such like Grant Morrison, who's also from the UK, Alan Moore, who's from the UK. Yep. You know, like the UK is such a central place for the whole entire modern occult ideas. Llewellyn Press is a UK imprint.
Graham Hancock is from here. You know, lots of types. Yeah, there's so many. I honestly think, Mr. Auldboy, that Auldboy, that it's because it's cold and rainy and lots of humidity, and there's nothing else to do. And so you tend to go inside and have a think. I mean that literally. What do you think? Where's it all come from?
I think you can see it in incremental stages in my sort of opinion. So obviously coming out of the Roman period, as I said, you've got these Anglo-Saxons. Now the old theory was, did they come over and conquer? Was the peaceful assimilation? And as more evidence is coming out, there's probably a 50-50. You know, it certainly wasn't just everyone getting massacred. There was some peaceful assimilation from what the evidence is showing. And then you have this move over to the Catholic apostolic faith as the Celtic Christianity kind of fades away. And then you have the Norman era, and the Normans, you know, that period is when you get rise to your Arthurian legends and myths. So I think you know, there's stuff's happening, and even today, you know, you go to Wales, and the Welsh, you know, who were, you know, the Britons who got pushed over to the extremities by, you know, different groups moving in, and you speak to Welsh people today, and they'll tell you how much, you know, the Welsh history and Welsh language over the years has been kind of suppressed to a certain degree, and I think that keeps people skeptical. Do you know what I mean? It keeps them skeptical of being spoon-fed certain things, because kids got caught speaking Welsh in school, you know, in the 1800s. You were sat in a corner with a hat that's, you know, like a dunce hat, basically saying don't speak Welsh. You know, this kind of thing was happening over the years, and I think it keeps people skeptical. And then you've got different influx of people. You have, you know, the Arthurian legends and coming about in the sort of, you know, 11th sort of century, this kind of period, 12th, and then you've got the Romance era. Then, you know, the chivalric Romance era stuff comes off the back of it, which sees you through to this 16th, 17th century, where then you have this kind of like a renaissance, as you were saying, and you have the people at the elite level going on these grand tours, going to going to Greece and Rome and things like that. And then off the back of this, then you've got this sort of, you know, occult kind of Aleister Crowley sort of era. And I think it's just a continuation over the years, because, as you mentioned, the Druid revival took place in, you know, 17, 18, 19th century. It was coming back, and there was a big revival. And, you know,
why do you think we like it though? Do you get me? So I'd say that's like a perfect what happened here, but why? Is it ley lined? Is it you know what I said? Is it because it's rainy and a bit miserable, especially up north? You know, is it because Britain's magic and the people are special? Is it, you know what I mean?
I honestly think it's because you live around these ancient monuments day by day as well. You know, people see them on a daily basis. I think it keeps them interested in this kind of thing in some way. It'll never die out unless you knock down those old monuments. You know what I mean? That's the way I kind of see it.
Yeah.
I'm a total mystic, so take with what I say as a grain of salt, use your own reason, but I think that the muse inspires people and is ever present, and it comes in cycles, right? The poles flip. It's like seasonal changes, and nemesis comes when people get oppressed or stuff gets too intense. One of the things you always notice is there's a backlash and then a backlash. These revivals always come out of a attack on a minority. It's like, oh, this is bad. What do you mean it's bad? Now everyone's looking at it. And then it spirals out of control, right? It's like, this is why someone like Crowley is so effective. I'm the beast 666. I'm the devil. And then people freak out. What do you mean you're the devil? And then you read what he's talking about, and there's nothing satanic really about it.
You do that, Snappy. That's your Hail Satan. That's your little passkey there. Your Hail Satan. It's like, they don't mean Hail Satan, you silly sods.
We're invoking the goddess.
Nature and reality, and let's look at the thing that it is. It's almost Buddhist, really, isn't it?
For me, the idea of Satan is about acknowledging this colonial project that has happened. Okay, what is Satan really? If you read the ancient literature from these Christians apologetics, they'll tell you blatantly. My favorite is Orosius. He says it plain. All that is evil is pagan. Satan is an amalgam of everything pagan and reduced to this scary other that can be vilified. What does Satan do? He possesses you. What is the heart of Greek religion? Possession, right? You know, who do they take? The light-bringing figures, Dionysus, Pan, these savior gods, the mother goddess. These are the people they vilify. Why? Because this was the heart of paganism. So they take what was essential and central and turn it into something cartoonish and evil, right? In order to other it, in order to reduce it. But that's what I want.
Without going too far away from the topic at hand, I would just like to add that there's this polemic that often goes on. I think it's there with the Asuras and the Devas, and other similar things,
yeah.
and the Titans and the Pantheon. It's like, we're in charge. No, we're in charge. No, you're the bad guys. No, you're the bad guys. No, you're the bad guys. They just keep flipping it, and it seems to be whenever a civilization needs a lot of change, they just go for the opposite of whatever's the tyrant right now. We'll flip it. You know, if the angels are oppressing us, then we're going with them demons.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, in a pagan concept, like in Greek paganism, right, they would describe this, especially through later understandings like Nietzsche, as the Apollonian and the Dionysian, right? The Dionysian is all about revelry, freedom, art, right? And it strives for that mystical communion, okay? This is contrasted with the Apollonian, which is all about refinement, perfection, scientific achievement, enlightenment, and bringing things up to its perfection. The problem, though, with either of these is that if either of these powers is in too much control, things start to fall apart. With the Dionysians, you don't build. Everything turns into, it's frivolity. So you're open to destruction. You're open to an outside force coming to destroy you. You don't build. You don't have scientific achievement. But the Apollonian, you have all this stagnation, hierarchy, control that leads to this crushing force. This is why within this mythology you have this constant flip between the two, right?
And so too with the Enlightenment, as we just said in England, that it was all the oppressions of Christianity. Well, we've got all this old pagan stuff that tells us to think differently. We've started to think differently. Here we go Enlightenment. Well, we flipped the pole. We flipped it. And we did it by looking at what you told us not to. That's how we found it.
So I got a question. I got another question for you all. It deals with Harry Potter, of all things, Harry Potter. And the first question is Harry Potter actually popular in UK? And the second question is that pagan religion coming through into a pop culture, into books for kids? Is J.K. Rowling harnessing this witchcraft and Wicca stuff, or is this just kids stuff? Or is she really harnessing something? Is there
I have
something
a lot
there?
of opinions, so I'll hold on.
Well, should Auldboy have a little?
Auldboy, go first.
I don't know much about it because that's not my kind of thing. But I heard a story. I don't know how true it is, but apparently one of those scrying mirrors went up for auction, the ones that John Dee was using, and apparently J.K. Rowling bought it. But I've not been able to find an article about it.
Juicy.
And she's actually has got. Is it Salvet Coagula, the tattoo that Baphomet's got?
Yeah.
She's got that tattoo as well.
Coagulate. Yes. Salvet Coagula. So I mean, that's not literally for Baphomet. That's an old alchemical adage. And in fact, the majority of the stuff that I've noticed in her works, I've only seen the films, I've not read the books. It is alchemy. That's her main source of I mean, there's lots of myths and she's touching everywhere. But I think the main motifs are alchemical in that.
So I'm a huge literature buff. Anyone who knows me, I read anything I get my hands on. I've read all of Harry Potter a couple times, and I think it is absolute trash. And I mean this with nothing but love. But I honestly believe that it's hierarchical. It's propaganda. This is it's a person who is created a universe that's all about justification for nobility and those who have control and those who have power. It's really a story about a working class person who gets accepted into the upper echelons of noble society and gets to be one of the good old boys, even though they weren't. And it's this magical neoliberal dream of if you work hard enough, you can achieve your dreams and you'll be accepted among the elite. Look at me. I worked hard and achieved my dreams. It's just propaganda. And the worst part about it is every time she brings up any kind of systemic issue, whether it's slavery or weird magical stuff, it's all justified. And then by the end of the story, nothing evolves, nothing changes. J.K. Rowling is very much a status quo, centrist to the absolute core. It's a very conservative book about projecting and maintaining this mythology of British nobility and the upper echelons and how people deserve their wealth and how if you work hard enough, you'll get it. It's a neoliberal wet dream. And it's just classic propaganda.
Cheers.
I can't handle it.
You tell them, Snappy.
Sorry, guys. I'm a crazy mystical anarcho-primitivist. Okay, so yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
I will counter that by saying that some structures are needed. It should be masculine and feminine. Beware of tearing down all the old structures if you have nothing to replace them with. You've got to be very careful about changing society. I think the West is suffering this right now. There's been a tumult of change, but not much wisdom around it.
No, I'm not calling for revolution, for sure.
Exactly.
Right?
And it's like, what do you have to replace this? You don't have anything. So let's be very careful. Let's examine what we've got and do this sensibly. However,
no, fundamentally, I'm about direct democracy. I think that we all need to work together. I think we all need to work together for solutions. And I think a big problem in our society is all of these people, whether it's JK or whoever, basically acting like they are the authority, that they know how to solve our issues and what to do. I'm sick and tired of anyone telling me that they know what works. What are you going to do? How are you going to convince people to do it with you? That's what we need. Practical work. I don't care about what your ideology is or your philosophical grandiose plan is. Practical shit in the real world. Get it done with your ideological differences. If you can put that shit aside and build something, that's what I'm interested in. Anyone who tells me my way or the highway, never freaking trust them or vote for them. You know, stupid.
Apart from us four, anything we say is absolutely the truth. You don't need to look into it. It's all fine. Nothing to see anywhere else. Just here. This is the one place you come for information.
Oh gosh.
All right, I got another question. Since the questions get us all riled up, political. Love it. The monarchy, the current state of the monarchy in England.
Oh dear.
With King Charles.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about it or how you feel about it. Where's it going? Where do you think it's going?
I've got a quick one, and then I think Auldboy's shaking his head already. There have been a lot of changes in Britain over this last decade or so, and I think, as we were talking before about the suppression of old Wales, well, even more so old England. Like most of us have no clue about what went on here before Shakespeare. You know, it's certainly. I mean, I'm no Auldboy does, and I've got a good idea, but it's not part of the culture. You know, so I think we need to reach back and hold on to our heritage a bit more. And the fact that the Queen died, however you may feel about that, she worked hard, and she was certainly somebody to, in a way, however you feel about other things, admire how hard she worked and how she composed herself. And now seeing how much England's changed and watching the royal family fall apart at the same time, there's a Fisher King, there's a Grail law kind of thing to this for me. That in the Grail, the Fisher King was the land itself, and he'd had a wound in his thigh, his penis, his creative power was cut off, and you know, by going on a quest, you can come back, ask the right questions, do the right things, sing the right song, utter the right magic words, build the right technology, and you can heal the land. You can heal the king and heal the land. And I think if I were to have my way, it would be a new myth. Britain needs a new myth that connects to the old ones, but projects to the future as well. So it's something that is the Britishness that is quickly disappearing right now. But we can do things.
I'm just at the stage of where I don't really follow what's going on with the royals anymore, to be honest. It was something I was raised by my grandparents. So, you know, my gran she obviously being an older generation, she was really, really, you know, into following what they were doing. She knew about, you know, all the kings and queens and all this. And I think one of the main reasons why the media kind of whips behind them is they're trying to keep them relevant, I believe. I think they know that the popularity's been on a bit of a decline, and they're just trying to, you know, keep them in the public sphere to keep them relevant, I suppose. But I'm at the stage where I just don't follow on with what they're doing at all. I'm just, you know, more interested in.
They're all dying, mate. They're all
yeah.
dying off. All going bald. A bit of a mixture between death and baldness.
You know, I'm the extreme one here, but there's nothing more racist and more elitist than a king. So sic semper tyrannis. That's my statement.
They own quite a lot of land as well.
I think it's unfair to cite racism at the royal family, seeing as we're English, you know, and England's, you know, we have a history, and that's the reason for things. It's not like we've gone. I don't want to get into all this stuff. It's yeah.
Well, it's the Grail myths. It's the Grail myths. This is the Grail.
I just mean that having an
Arthurian legends,
having an elitist kind of family that's in charge, that's chosen by God, this is the root of a lot of this. Whether it's classism or racism or casteism or any of these divisionary politics, it's the same kind of mentality that keeps these things in check. And I think we need to get rid of these ideas. Like, I refuse. I do not subjugate. I do not serve. Neither.
Oh no, God, no.
You know.
So I don't think it's really fair to look at the royal family. And look, I'm not a royalist. I'm just being fair here. So it's, you know, like you need a president for your constitution. In France, they have a prime minister and a president. Now, if we didn't have the king who represents those things, we'd need a president. So we supplant one for another. And because of that link to the past.
But a president is not divinely chosen by God, and it's not.
Nobody believes that's not me.
It doesn't matter. That's what it's stated, and that's the reality of it. They're chosen by blood. Right? They're chosen by this outdated Merovingian, ancient European weird cult shit, and it perpetuates elitism into the future.
Yeah. That's why I brought it up. I know we were going to get a little spicy and political on purpose.
This is great.
Because I know this will push everyone's buttons.
I mean,
because I know that.
I also, like, I'm Quebecois. I come from Canada. The anti-monarchism is like, it's in the roots of my being. It was brainwashed into me from the day I was born. I'm sorry.
Because I'm saying this, I bring this up. I bring this up because I know that the royal family and Charles is holding occult knowledge. Yes. I know that York, the Duke of York, he's in charge of of a whole Masonic rite. He's the Grand Master of it all. So whether I like these people or not, or whether I agree with anything or not, I'm fascinated by them. They're holding on to some ancient knowledge, and in terms of the Grail stuff, there's something there with this Grail Arthurian magic. With the Fisher King, if somebody's going to be in charge, you'd want them to do a good job, and there's a role model there. But are they walking in those shoes? No. But there is a role model there. There is a role model there, and so I'm going to get more into it in the future because they're very spicy. Just the whole family, everything about it, everything about England, about Ireland, about Scotland. I love it all.
And there is a lot of mystery in this Arthurian magic myth, right? Like Galahad we've talked about this, Auldboy, but I'm almost certain Galahad is just a stand-in for a eunuch, a Galloway, right?
Yeah, the wounded knight. Yes.
Right? The wounded knight who's all purity and doesn't engage in any kind of intercourse, right? Like it's a Galloway.
There's a Hermetic magician in there as well. What's his name? He comes across Parzival comes across a Hermetic magician. I forget his name. Right. It's like
I can't recall.
Now, earlier you said Brittany. Earlier you said Brittany. A lot of people don't know that Brittany, the relationship with the Arthurian legends in Brittany, in England, and the island of Jersey, the Orkney Island, which I'd like to get into because I got Orcadian roots. Nice. I'm 63% Orcadian Scottish there, and I got. My family has a seat in as Welsh as well, and so I'm into it. I love this history and this culture. This is just barely scratching the surface, just to get you guys together. It took a couple months to get everyone together. So I want more of this. I want more.
Can you do a Scottish accent, Dion?
No, it's with
Come
the
on,
T.
do us a Scottish accent.
Tere-
Don't you last Snappy, you're
tere-
next. All right, then, how you doing?
I looked it up,
Come on.
and I looked it up as a language to study it. You could study it on the language app.
Cool.
It blows
It's
my mind
wild.
in the UK. You travel like 2 miles and it's like everyone speaks a different dialect.
Well,
You can tell someone's class and the region they're born just by the way they talk. It's wild.
yeah. Well, old boy, you're from what? 30 minutes up the road from me, really? Maybe 40 minutes.
Yeah, the borders are there. Yeah.
And if I speak with my actual accent, because I spent a long time in New York and London, so I don't have my actual accent. All right, cock, how's they doing, love? You know, getting on bloody internet, you know, like and that. What you doing tonight? What's they doing? It sounds like old Shakespeare in English.
Yeah.
There's lots of these and thys. What's that doing tonight? Can you do your Cumbrian for me?
Say, how's it going, Mara? What you doing tonight?
What you doing tonight? Love?
What you doing tonight? Yeah.
Sorry, cockle. Are you okay,
guys? This was so much fun. We're coming up to our 2-hour mark. We'll definitely all have to get back together again, but let's wind down here. So we'll go to you, Ryan. Any final comments for our audience today? Any last statements to make about the UK occult and John Dee?
Oh my word, that's so much. All I would say is, like, you know, if you look at John Dee particularly, he is from him go many tentacles that you can discover all this occult stuff. And I've been studying this stuff for a long time, very deeply. That stuff I gave about John Dee's number symbolism goes all the way back to Pythagoras and possibly to that 40,000 years ago. If you learn that, and then when you're reading things, you'll see it. And that'll be, again, a central hub for you to work so many other secrets out from. I'm always finding new ones, but most of them, like with John Dee, they all go back to that one central idea that he was trying to get out that he hid in Shakespeare and his works. So.
Yeah, that's amazing, right? You know, there's no Crowley without John Dee. Babylon comes from John Dee. Auldboy, how about you? Any last words for our audience? Any statements about the Druids or the occult UK history?
Well, I just wanted to say, like Dion's already mentioned, we've barely scratched the surface, but it's safe to say people who've inhabited these islands have been interested in this kind of thing for an extremely long time. So I just want to say thank you for having me. It's been, you know, amazing. I've been looking forward to it. And, you know, I look forward to getting into some more of this stuff in the future.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Auldboy. How about you, Dion? Any final words for our audience?
First of all, you got to subscribe to their channels, Ryan Seven and Auldboy.
Yeah.
You know, the wealth of knowledge, hundreds of videos. You're going to blow your mind, learn so much about history and culture, occultism. I'm barely scratching the surface of watching their videos. You know, I want them back for more because we're barely getting started. You know, we're going to get deep into this stuff.
We didn't even get into the Wiccan pagan wars that Dion was talking about, or Crowley, or the Golden Dawn, or even Arthurian legend.
Auldboy took us back to the beginning of time, and it was like, oh yeah, there's all that stuff right at the beginning, and yeah, you know, you were like, oh yeah, there's the Druids, and we're like, hang on a minute, the Stonehenge was round at the pyramids. Yeah, so I'm very much up for doing lots more, and I'd like to see what Dion pulls up as well, because he always seems to find things that you've never even imagined. Like, I've never even thought about thinking about half the stuff that you come out with. So I'm looking, especially as we come up to the modern age, I know less. You know, I think Auldboy obviously knows the real history. I know this kind of Renaissance period, and maybe a bit of Crowley stuff, but I'm sure Dion's got a lot of juicy stuff. Gerald Gardner and all these kind of guys.
You were looking into the Temple of Diana and these Wiccan wars. You were sending me all this crazy stuff.
I got the books I ordered from England. They're right here. Yep. I got the original books from, I got a series of books that go back to Dumblecop Magic Productions, Charles Cardell. And these different witch covens in the 60s. He has a whole book right here against Gerald Gardner, Rex Nemesis, Nemerensis.
So
it deals with
that is
Dion Fortune.
Rex Nemerensis, though, is the title of the priest at the Temple of Diana in ancient Rome.
Yeah. And what's funny, in this book, it even has Gerald Gardner's birth certificate. You got Gerald Gardner's birth certificate right here. That's how deep we're going to go in the next episode.
Holy crap.
For you Wiccans.
But yes, thank you guys so much for coming. We will definitely do a part 2 where we go in deep with some Dion research. Make sure you subscribe to Auldboy. They've been doing a new series where they're doing shorter 10-minute videos, still talking about comparative mythology in the British Isles and within the Celtic culture, looking at things like, he recently did that video on the Brigantes, which was just incredible. So all that stuff in Spain, totally new to me. I never, you hear the Celts are in Spain, but outside of learning about later Basques, I never knew any of that history. So love it.
I will go and watch that after this podcast, mate. That sounds great. Yeah, that's really interesting.
And make sure you check out Ryan's channel. Ryan has a couple of podcasts that he does with his friends. There's I think it's the Amish podcast, or what's it called, Ryan?
Amish Inquisition. Yeah, the Amish Inquisition. Meant to sound Spanish. Everyone thinks they're actually Amish, and it's like, no, they're drunk idiots.
Hilarious. And then you have a TV show that you're working on that you're going to be producing with Netflix on the Satyr Square.
But also, Snappy, I've just finished my tarot deck, and it's about to be going on Kickstarter soon. So I'm going to be heating that up somehow. I don't know, but I'm going to be talking to lots of podcast people. Whoever will pimp me out, I'm going to accept it.
I will definitely pimp you out. Let's talk and do another deep dive once you get the deck solidified. And let's do it.
Yeah.
Once there's that Kickstarter link so that I can direct everyone there. But
that's the idea, yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Peace and love, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.